Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to attempt to answer the age-old question, what is the best method for mining diamonds? Now I know a lot of people have already covered this topic and there's a lot of info online about it, but I've yet to really see any in-depth testing of the methods. So that is what I want to do in this video. In determining the best method for mining diamonds, I'm going to be answering 3 questions along the way. First, which layer is best to mine at? Second, which mining tunnel technique is the most efficient? And then lastly, and one that I haven't seen talked about much, is does spacing actually matter? As I'm editing this video, a new snapshot has been released, 23W31A. In it, it states that diamond ore is now generated more frequently. What that means regarding this video is that the numbers that I show at the very end of the results from my testing are no longer going to be entirely accurate. However, the overall trends of the results will still be the same. So the fastest methods will still be the fastest. Their numbers will just be decreased because they're even faster now. Okay, back to the video. To help answer that first question, it's nice to break it up into 2 pretty easy parts. The first one is which single layer actually has the most diamond ore available. And second, which layer is actually going to expose the most diamonds. So to answer the first part of this question, we could just look at this graphic that's been going around for Minecraft 1.18 and above. That shows a triangular distribution for the diamond ore, meaning the lower you go in Y level, the more diamond ore there are. But I kind of wanted to verify this for Minecraft 1.20 at least, and see if it's actually accurate. So I used a carpet mod command called count blocks, and I specify an area here, and I also filter all the deep slate diamond ore is what I want to actually count. And using this, I'm able to go layer by layer up through -50 is what I tested, because above that it really doesn't matter. Here I show a 1000 by 1000 block area, which is 1 million square blocks. And I did this for every layer from -64 all the way to -50. And I input that data into an Excel sheet, which I'll show you in a sec. So here's that data that I put in using the count block method. You'll see I've got 4 different areas, and that was to start off using a smaller area to see if my computer could handle it, and then I moved up in size. I did crash several times using the larger areas, but we eventually got to a 1 million square block area. Each of the row numbers is the raw data of how many diamond ore blocks are in each layer. Over here you can see I just graphed each area's distribution, and what I quickly noticed was that layer -56 actually had the most diamonds consistently. So that answers the first part of the question, which layer has the most diamonds? Layer -56 has the most diamonds. But more importantly is part 2 of the question. Which layer do we need to mine on that will actually expose the most diamonds? And to do this, I had to copy the data over here, because 1 tall tunnels will expose only 3 layers, while 2 tall tunnels will expose 4. And so I created sum columns and then summed 3 layers total. And so this layer here is the layer that you're actually going to mine for a 1x1. And then the layer above you is the ceiling, and the layer below you is going to be the floor. And so you're exposing 3 layers total. And that'll give you a sum here of how many diamond ore you're exposing if you mine on this layer. And so I repeated this for every layer and showed that layer -57 and -56, depending on the area size, would expose the most diamond ore. Then repeating this for the 2 talls, it's a little different because you're now summing 4. You have the layer that you're mining at, which is actually the layer of your feet. And then you have the layer that your head is at. And then you have the ceiling, obviously, and the floor below you. So we sum 4 total to get the total potential diamond ore blocks that you can expose for that layer that you're mining at. We found that layer -57 was the best for the 2 talls. And so to keep it kind of consistent, we said layer -57 would be the best layer to mine at for our 1x1s as well. But with question number 1 out of the way, we can move on to question number 2. Which mining tunnel is the most efficient? Which one's the best? Here are the 4 tunnels I tested. We have a 1x1, we have a 1x1 with branches off of it, we have a 2x1, and then a 2x1 with branches off of it as well. To answer which mining method is actually the best, we're going to use 2 metrics. The first is the most common that everyone else uses, It's the blocks exposed per block mined. And I have that represented here. The blocks exposed are the stained glass, and the block mined is the wool block. That's for each method. The second metric we're going to use is actually, I think, more accurate, and I haven't seen other people mention or use it. And that's going to be blocks exposed per second. Because really, we want to get as many diamonds as quick as possible, and that is a time metric. So how do we determine how many blocks exposed per mine that we get? Well, we can jump over here, and it's pretty easy to show. Most people would say for a 1x1 area, you mine out 1 block, and how many do you expose? 5. So their ratio would be 5-1. And for a 2x1, you would mine 2, and you would expose 8. So it'd be a 4-1 ratio. Now, this is not actually correct. It's correct for this example, where you mine 1 block deep, and then maybe if you go mine another 1 block deep, but no one really mines like that. They continue to mine. So a 1x1 area is going to expose really 4 blocks for every one you mine. This can actually be proven using a limit. So if we represent this tunnel as 4x plus this 1, we can then take the limit of that formula. And if you don't like calculus, you might not care, but it does work. You take the limit of this and it approaches 4. And I'll prove that again in a second. But for this tunnel as well, you don't just mine 1 deep and then move on. You continue to mine. And so you're not actually exposing 4 for every block you mine. It actually is represented by this formula. And if we take the limit of this formula, we approach 3. So the actual ratios are 4-1 and 3-1. So I can prove this to you really quick over here. We have this tunnel, 100 blocks long. So if we start at the front and move all the way to the back, we can see we've stopped mining, quote unquote. Now, if we just count this area, we can count the number of wool blocks, and that's going to be 100. And we can also count the number of light blue stained glass, which is the number of blocks exposed in this 100 long tunnel. And what you'll see, we got 401 blocks exposed over 100 blocks actually mined. And so that's a 4.01 ratio. If this tunnel was infinitely long, that number would be 4. The tunnels with the branch mines off of them are not as clean to represent using a formula, so I didn't bother. I just went ahead and counted using the exact same method I just showed you, and I'll pop up on the screen right now the ratios for each of these methods of blocks exposed per block mined. Using these numbers, we would all say that the 1x1 tunnel is the most efficient, and I would agree with you. But a better method to use, which does show itself in the final results, is using the ratio blocks exposed per second. So to do this, I changed the mode to survival and replaced all the wool blocks with deep slate, which is what you're actually mining at these levels. And then I timed myself how long it takes to mine this length of blocks, including placing torches down and for these tunnels turning left to right. So I'll put those results on the screen now as well. Now, I did repeat this test several times as there's a lot of uncertainty in 1, testing myself, and 2, actually mining myself as well. Now, the numbers shown are just for this 100 by 100 length. And so obviously, once we start introducing different spacings in a certain area, the larger spacings mean there are going to be less blocks to actually mine. And so the numbers will change a little bit as parts of these tunnels get cut off. But it doesn't really matter, as this metric isn't the final one we're going to use to determine which method is the best. But it does indicate pretty accurately which methods are the most efficient. Now we've answered really which methods are the most efficient. The 1x1 tunnel is going to be the best. It's got the best blocks exposed to mined ratio, and it's got the best exposed per second ratio as well. Now that we've got questions number 1 and 2 answered, we know which layer is best to mine at. It'll be Y-57. We also know which technique is the most efficient. It's going to be our 1x1. But we still don't know if spacing actually matters. So what I need to do is actually test this technique across various spacings. And so that is what I've got laid out here. I have our 1x1 method with 0 spacing, 1 spacing, 2, and 3 spacings all the way down there. I went ahead and did the same thing for the other 3 mining techniques. Even though we know they're not as efficient in terms of blocks exposed per second, I really did want to test them for 2 reasons. The first is that maybe there's a chance they actually perform better in this third test than the 1x1s. And two, and this is the main reason, I want to put numbers behind how much worse they are instead of just saying, okay, they're not as good. You might be wondering how I'm actually going to test whether or not spacing matters. And unfortunately for me, it's a lot harder than just calculating how many diamonds are in a layer or a nice little ratio that's convenient. What I've got to do, as you kind of see in the background, is that I need to test different diamond distributions. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I can't just do one layer testing. The easiest way to understand this is, let's imagine I have only the no spacing version and the 3-block spacing version for our 1x1 tunnels. If this is our only diamond distribution, entire 100x100 area, and it's just mirrored over here, so it's the same distribution for both plots, what will happen is I'd mine both of them. So I'd mine all 8 blocks for this method and all 8 blocks for this method as well. But because I'm mining so much less, this method is going to seem a lot worse because I'm mining probably twice as much as I would be over here for the same amount of diamonds. So if I just tested that one diamond distribution layer, this method would be superior by quite a lot. I actually did do this already in a different testing world. I did the 1-layer testing and found that this method with the 1x1 technique and the 3-block spacing was the most efficient and the best method to use. However, spoiler alert, that is not the correct way to do it, and this method is not the most efficient. All right, hopefully we're all on the same page that we need to test multiple layers and not just one for each method. So that is what I did. Here you'll see the 10 layers that I imported from a random seed. I used this outside application called Amulet to open my worlds. This, I believe, is similar to MC Edit, in which I can manipulate my Minecraft worlds without opening Minecraft. And so here is the testing world I was just in. I can also open up a new world seed. What I did was I would open a new world in Amulet. I would then select a 100x100 area. I would then select the correct Y coordinates. Then I would just copy. I would then paste it into my diamond testing world. I won't do that while recording because it might crash my computer, but all I would do is select paste and paste the 100x100 area into the world. After doing this for one section, I would simply move the selection box over until I got a new chunk. I did this 10 total times to get the stack I just showed. All right, now that you know how I got this stack of 10 100x100 areas into the world, I want to show you guys what I did with it and how I actually tested to see if spacing matters and which method was the best overall. So I copied over this stack here, and using a bunch of world edit commands, I was able to clear out every block but the deep slate diamond ore, because that's obviously all we care about. Next, what I did was copy this again, which I'll do right now. And it'll take a minute, a million blocks. My computer is really slow, but there we've got it. So you might be asking why I copied this entire stack over. Well, the answer is pretty easy. This stack over here is showing me the entire diamond distribution for each one of these chunks, which I don't actually need. What I need and care about are which diamonds I would call possible diamond ore, meaning which diamond ore will I actually be able to mine if I'm using the 1 tall layers or a 2 tall layer method. How do I determine this? Well, all I do is go to our Y level -57 and select that entire layer. For the 2-block methods, what I did was instead of creating just one layer, I would do the layer above as well, so it's 2-layer total. And then I would replace that layer with wool blocks. I wouldn't replace the entire layer. As you noticed, I did use the world edit command replace the air, meaning all of the blocks that are not diamond ore get set to whatever block I want. This then allows me to easily see which diamond ore are possible. You'll notice if they're not touching the layer, they're not possible. So for this one, this air block would actually be deep slate and would be covering up this ore. So I would go ahead and remove it because it's not possible. Same thing with these ones and these. If the diamond was like this, in which I would mine this one, I also kept these ones as well, because when I mine, I usually mine a couple blocks around any ore that I find, just in case there are scenarios like this. And I did that for every layer in this entire stack. And I had to do it twice because obviously a block like this would not be seen at all using a 1-layer method, but a 2-layer method, it could expose this block. Once I had those 2 unique stacks completed, I set them up in front of the corresponding mining technique. So our 1 tall layers had this stack, and the 2 tall mining techniques back there that you can't see would have their own stacks in front of them as well. So fast forward a little bit of time, and I've copied over the version that I've already done. So I've gone ahead and cleared out all of the non-possible ores for this stack, and so that is what that looks like. Once I had this completed, all we had to do was make our stacks of mining tunnels and then copy over to these diamonds. So let me do that really quick. So there is the stack. I'll then copy this stack at a set point, and we can go over to the same set point in this 100 by 100 area. And when I paste, I'm using a tag called -A, which pastes everything but the air. So I'm not replacing any of my blocks in this section, unless they're being overridden by diamond ore like that one. So that is really the extent of the preparation. And then I had this done for all 16 100 by 100 areas and with their unique mining method. Like I said, I simulated mining, and this is how I did it. I would go through each layer by layer, and find blocks that aren't touching the wool directly. And so all of these ones would be exposed if they're touching the wool. But for ore like this, where it's not directly touching one of the 4 faces of the wool blocks, we would delete it, because that means it's not touching this mine. So you wouldn't expose it using a 1x1 method with 0 block spacing in between exposed blocks. So this mining method would not expose those diamonds, and we won't count them in our total. So I did this for all 160 layers that I wanted to test. And here are the results. It took quite a long time, but we did end up getting it done. With that out of the way, all we had to do was just use the world edit command count. All we had to do was count how many deep slate diamond ore are in this section. I did this for all 160 layers and gathered the data into a nice Excel spreadsheet, which I will show you right now. If you've made it through the video so far, I appreciate it. I know it's been a pretty long one, but hopefully you found it interesting up to this point. If you've skipped to this point in the video, that's okay too. I appreciate you being here in the end. So let's get into the results. So here is the times page. And this was one of the most important to get down, because if you remember, the golden metric we're trying to search for and calculate is the seconds per diamond ratio for each mining method. What we need is a time to mine, seconds part of that calculation. If you go off of the wiki, it takes 0.6 seconds to break 1 block of deep slate. So just calculating that out based on how many blocks are mined, or the wool blocks in each of those 100 by 100 plots, you would get an expected time to mine. However, when I actually tested this and mined in a survival mode, it took me significantly longer. And here I just did a really quick calculation to show you how much longer. It's 63% longer. The actual time to mine does include placing torches and things like that, and for the branch mines turning left and right. However, I wouldn't expect that to add that much more time, but I guess it did. We need this actual time to mine because that will be crucial for the end seconds per diamond ratio. Now, I won't go through the other calculations, but I will scroll down if you'd like to pause at any time and take a look closer. I have 4 tabs defined by each of the mining techniques, and then in each tab I have 4 charts. Each chart corresponds to one of those 100 by 100 plots based on the gap variation. And so obviously this is our 1x1 with no gap, and all the way over here is our 1x1 with 3 gaps. And then in each chart I have the layers 1 through 10 and the counted number of diamond ore blocks in those layers. Here again you see the time, and it's obviously the same for every layer because it's the same number of mined blocks per layer. And this is the actual time calculation from here. Once we have the time and the diamonds, it's easy to calculate a seconds per diamond ratio. We could do a diamonds per second, but that would be ugly decimal and wouldn't really make any sense. So this is a much better way to do it. You want to find diamonds frequently, which means you want a short amount of seconds per diamond. The best one here is this 43 seconds per diamond, which is pretty good. But you also got one that's 190 seconds per diamond, which is over 3 minutes long. This emphasizes why we needed to test multiple layers. Because if we had just tested, say, layer 9, best one is your 3-block gap method. And so if I had just done that one layer, I would be advising that you use 1x1s with a 3-block gap in between exposed blocks. However, once we actually take the averages of all 10 layers, we easily see that 3-block gap is the worst for the 1x1 methods. And the classic 1x1 with 1-block gap between the exposed blocks, or another way you could say that is 3 blocks between tunnels, that gives us a 71.8-ish seconds per diamond calculation. And that's actually really good. You'll see here also that I've got standard deviations shown. If you're into math or statistics or finance even, you might care about those. Most people don't really care about standard deviations, and honestly, they don't really matter here. So I won't go into them, but they're there if you like to see. I won't go through in detail these branches, but I'll pause on each so you can take a look if you'd like. And here is just a summary page with the results all shown together. We see that the 1x1 with the 1-block gap is the best overall, which is not terribly surprising, as when we answered question number 2, we found that the 1x1 was the most efficient mining technique. We just wanted to confirm whether or not spacing mattered. And here we see that spacing does matter. Obviously, you don't want to go too close, and you really don't want to go too far apart because then you're just wasting time. One last thing I like to point out is the 2x1 branch method. I actually used to use this method years ago when I would mine in my survival worlds, and I'm glad I stopped because I didn't realize how much worse it was than the 1x1s. It's almost twice as long to find a diamond compared to the 1x1 method. That pretty much wraps up results. Not too shocking, honestly, but it's a good kind of validation that the 1x1 is really the best. And it shows you kind of by how much more it is superior. If you're still using one of these other 3 methods, I do hope this video convinces you to switch. Maybe you have reservations because the 1x1 tunnel method requires the trapdoor and getting down to the flying position, and maybe you pop up when you're mining. And I understand that does become annoying, but once you've done it enough, you get pretty good at it. One last mention before I end the video. A lot of people mention cave mining as the best method no matter what. So if you're doing this tunnel mining, if you happen to stumble upon a cave, obviously go in it because you're exposing so many more blocks per second because you don't have to dig. And I do that, but I always limit myself to sticking pretty close to my tunnel because I really don't like cave mining. I'm not sure if it's actually faster. I didn't test it in this video because I don't use it ever. Also because it's pretty hard to test consistently. I might give that a go in another video. Let me know down in the comments actually if you'd like to see that, and that could be a topic for another time. But that's all I've got for today. Thanks so much.